The means test is for Jamison Whiskey, triple distilled, twice as smooth, one of a kind. David King, happy grand final week.
Oh, we're here, G. We're here. We didn't think we'd get here, but it's been an unbelievable year. I think this has been the best year of football I can remember for 2 or 3 decades. The home and away season was ridiculously even. It had peaks and troughs for the good teams and the poor teams. And in the end, the best 2 teams for the season probably get through. The final series has been crazy. The first Thursday and Friday night games of the first week of the finals were terrific, and the prelims didn't disappoint. So we're finally here. We know all we need to know about these 2 teams, and we've got no idea how it finishes up.
All right, the King's Gambit is going to start with the words of your old coach, Dennis Pagan.
I've got no doubt that Craig and Chris are both outstanding coaches, but you'll find out a bit more about them because, you know, it's a tough assignment to get to a grand final, another even tougher one to win one. The best side doesn't win. It's the best side on the day. So how do you know that?
It's the best side on the day. I think they're absolutely spot-on words by Dennis when he said that on Friday. He's been talking about that for years, but when he said it on Friday, it all comes flooding back. And anything can happen on one given day. We're talking about performing on the biggest stage. Some do, some don't. The Stars generally do. They generally do. Whether they're 10 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, they're generally around the mark. And if they don't, they're a big story. But you always get a wild card performance. A Glenn Freeborn kicking 3 goals in 10 minutes. A Darren Jarman going crazy at full forward. No one predicted Sean Hart to win a Norm Smith. And Nick Fosdyke, a Jason Graham. Those types of players. Isaac Smith kicked 3 goals last year. He kicked 3 goals twice in his last 130-odd games. Like, to do it in a grand final, you just can't predict these things. I look at my old teammate, Martin Pike, who really, when things were wobbly for the Brisbane Lions at certain stages in the first half of multiple grand finals, in multiple positions, was able to really seriously impact games. So there's always wild card players you don't expect to have significant impact on the biggest game of all, but they do. I don't know who it's going to be this week. None of us know. And I don't know which Stars are going to perform and which ones are going to just be 7.5 or 8 out of 10. But that's the beauty of this week. So to sit here and say this is what's going to happen is just ridiculous. Let's just appreciate that the hardest part about winning the premiership is getting to the grand final. And these 2 teams have done an unbelievable job, right up until the last weekend of qualification to get there. But all we know now is that anything can happen.
So the big issue, we have 1 versus 2 in the grand final, which is historically so rare. Just looking back, so it hasn't happened since 2014. In this finals construct, which began in 2000, it's only happened 7 times.
Yep.
And only once has 1 beaten 2 in a grand final. The other 6 times, 2 has proven victorious, and every other time we get some sort of wacky other combination. But only in 2007 when Geelong beat Port Adelaide does it run in racebook order. You wouldn't credit that.
No, it's always an interesting discussion. If the game's at the MCG every year, then you probably it's so much harder for teams that are in the state. I always look at the West Australian teams, how hard it is for them to come to Melbourne and win the grand final, even if it is just travelling once for 4 weeks. It's incredibly tough. If the grand final moved around and changed venues, I think you would get a truer form line with the AFL ladder at the end of season. But it's not to be. It's not going to change anytime soon, Jared, without any weird complications like COVID. So you've just got to take your opportunity. This is all this is now, is to grab it with both hands, and which coaching staff can set their team up the best and which team can actually perform on the day will do that.
So stitched into that is it's sort of Collingwood's form versus Brisbane at the MCG. I feel like the Lions are in better form, but there is a waiting on the game being at the MCG.
Because so the MCG.
How are you approaching the state that both teams are in as they reach the big one?
Well, that's the 2 things for me. So look, you've got to go through Chicago. We've always said that. Michael Jordan said, we've got to go through Chicago. So you've got to win at the MCG. You've got to win the big game. But if you go back and have a look at the Brisbane Lions, and we make a lot of the last 30 times they've played there, none of them have any bearing on what happens this week. None of them. And if you look at the form line this year, what they got beaten by Melbourne, and they blew that more than Melbourne won that.
Yep.
And people say, that's ridiculous.
They had a chance to bury all of this that night, but weren't able to.
But they
were
sort of
still the
did.
better team in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah, they sort of did. I think that Chris Fagan can stand at the front of the group and say, hey, listen, we know what happened here. They got to a point where they were smashing them, really. And they got beaten in the Hawks, by the Hawks, I should say, in round 13. And 5 of the 23 that were in that team are not going to be there this Saturday. So, I don't get too consumed with the last time they met and what's happened at venues to a point. Is it more difficult for Brisbane to have to travel, to be out of their own situation, they're away from their own immediate setups and family and all that sort of stuff? Of course it is. Of course it is. Collingwood have got the dream run. They stay in their normal routine. If they get up and have a coffee at the local coffee shop at 8 o'clock every morning, well, they can do that. Brisbane don't have that luxury. So it throws you a little bit, and that's when you rely on being prepared and being experienced. They've never been in a better situation, Brisbane, than what they are right now. The one rider that I want to put on really early with this game, and this is huge. The only thing that significantly changes what we know about these two teams is no Dan McStay. And that, people just going, we'll just bring in Jack Ginnivan and he'll do this and he'll do that, and Hoskin Elliott will do this and do that. 100% wrong. Over the last 10 weeks, he's been the number one player that turns a targeted entry inside 50 into a goal in the competition. Not at Collingwood, in the competition. He's been the last 10 weeks, he's been the number one player that when you kick it to him, the team get a goal. So he creates soft drops. You'll remind yourself of the weekend where McCreary just wraps around, grabs the ball after a little soft drop because he takes all the heat. And only big bodies can take impact like that. If that's a small frame, the spoil gets done and it clears the area. And you don't get that secondary drop of ball opportunity or the stoppage. You just don't get those luxuries. So he's not a small contributor. So when they go to Dan McStay the last 10 weeks, 50% of the time, almost 50% of the time, the team kick a goal. That's a huge number. So of his 30 targets, 15 were goals for the team. In his last 9 games, he's been a multiple goal kicker in 8 of them. So these are not numbers that are normal. 17 goals in that period. Only Jamie Elliott has kicked more. So this is not a small absence. This is not something you can say, we've got a like for like. We'll just bring in Billy Frampton. I'm sorry. That's not right.
So this is not the game that you want to have to move away from your structure, is it?
You don't want to be experimenting grand final day. So this you can't avoid this, and this is none of Collingwood's doing. This is just sheer bad luck. But when you're looking at who's your target, who's your beacon, 0 to 30 from goal, the one that where formations happen, where you set up your crumbing unit, you set up your first line of pressure, we're going to him. Well, that now has to be Mason Cox, which he can do this role. But Mason Cox has been their best ruckman. He's been enormous in the ruck, Mason Cox, the last 2 weeks. So do you ask him to play more forward? So then now you lose around the footy. So there's a flow-on effect to the small advantages you give the opposition, and they're only minor, and they're still got to take advantage of in Brisbane. But if Mason Cox doesn't work down forward, then you're going back to Myercheck again. Now Myercheck's had a so-so season. So is he that one of those guys, one of those names I just mentioned before, that can bob up and kick forward? Probably. He's that type of player, but he's going to have to do it against some really high-quality defenders for the Brisbane Lions who are geared defensively. They are a very good defensive unit. So there are no real luxuries. There are no real spoils. So this absence, the Dan McStay absence, changes everything.
Does Collingwood's offensive game worry you at the moment? Their winning scores have been 58 and 60, which is not the team from the earlier portion of the season, but it does go to, you had that rider on them that while we were all caught up in their electrifying ball movement and speed, is they were a defensive team first. It was sort of the misnomer in the way that we would watch them.
Yeah.
But I think they would feel like they're stodgy at the moment.
They're an amazing team, and everyone that you talk to who knows their footy, and my close mates really know their footy, and they talk about what value do you put on knowing how to win? What is that worth? Does it really matter that the scoreline says 105 points to 95 and you find a way to hang on and win, or 103 to 102, or if it says 59 to 58, does it make any difference if you just know what to do and how to get over the line? Well, there's a lot of merit in that discussion, and we can't really sit here and say, oh, well, this is great. But one thing you can do is stop the opposition scoring like they did for the last 6.5 minutes the other night.
Yep.
That's doable. But I just worry if it's the other way around. What if they're chasing the scoreboard and they have to take the risk against a well-set Brisbane? They've been able to do that across the last 18 months, but it's not. It's just a risky proposition, isn't it? But what weight do you put on that? What are your thoughts on?
I would like them to be scoring a little bit better than they are It feels like their best footy is about 8 weeks ago at the moment, and they're trying to recapture that. There are parts of their game that are in good order, but their offensive game is not the way that it had been when they were playing their best footy. And I wouldn't have thought, if you'd said to me coming into the final series, Collingwood win their 2 games, I'm not giving you 58 and 60 as their winning scores.
Well, the one thing...
I think they'll have to kick more than that to beat Brisbane on a sunny day at the MCG.
So when you look at scoring profiles, I tend to go a bit deeper than just the flat number. How are they scoring and how aren't they scoring? So at the moment now, they've really only got one asset, and that's scoring off halfback, counterpunch from halfback. So on the weekend, 6 goals, 2. So 38 points of their 58 come from that springboard off halfback. Now that's as much about GWS ball use, forward of centre, as it is about Collingwood. They had 41 intercepts at halfback. So that area from the centre circle of the middle of the ground to the top of 50, that little wedge, it's, 30, 40 metre wedge there, 41 intercepts. That's a ridiculous number. Plus 15 contested possessions on GWS in that zone. If they don't get that, and Brisbane, I'm telling you now, Brisbane are not giving them that.
Yep.
They might get them in other ways, but they will not give the ball back because Riccardi, Brown, Hogan was inconsistent. Toby Green didn't have a contested possession in that zone, that little wedge we're talking about. The stocks at Brisbane are better than Riccardi, Brown, Hogan and Green. Green not having one. So I should not Green as a package, but he was more forward 50 than attacking mid-zone area. That you're talking about. Danaher is in good form. Don't talk down Eric Hipwood. Okay, may miss some shots at goals, but he's moving beautifully. And then they've got that host of small hybrids that are not.
McCarthy was so good on Saturday.
They're not giving up those numbers.
Yep.
They're not getting beaten plus 15 contested possessions and giving the ball back 41 times. They'll be more precise, more methodical, a little bit slower until it's out and gone. So if they can take that off Collingwood, where do they score? How do they find they haven't got a forward half game at the moment. 2 goals, 3 against Melbourne and 2 goals, 4 against GWS. And everyone tells me, fine, if you're going to win premierships, you've got to have a great forward half game. They don't have it. They've found ways to win, and we just dip our lid to them. We say, awesome, well done. But you are not doing that against the Brisbane Lions.
David King is here for the Monday means test for Jameson Whiskey, triple distilled, twice as smooth, one of a kind. Let's work our way through. Our favourite category is PFI, Preliminary Final Integrity. What will it look like on the penultimate weekend? So let's start with Friday night and the difference makers, those who seized control of the preliminary finals.
Yeah, it all starts and finishes with Jordan De Goey. I mean, his game was just one for the ages, really. 34 disposals, 13 clearances. The 13 clearances were a PB. So he's clearly never done that before. He'd had only 10 or more twice in his last 160 games. So to have this game was huge. 50% of those. He was 50% of Collingwood's centre bounce clearances and 30% of their clearances in total. It's an unbelievable game. Yep. It's a huge game. He had 17 contested possessions, was equal PB. And the honest truth is that over the last 7 weeks, Jordan De Goey had become an uncontested possession player. 9, 6, 5, 6, and 8 contested possessions the previous 5 weeks. And Lee Montetti and I have been tracking it, so he's become a corridor runner waiting for that first handball receive, which is a really important function in the way Collingwood play. You see them burst from clearance and they're coming inboard, and there's De Goey. He hadn't been the one taking it from inside to out. He'd been the one already out. So this version of Jordan De Goey is totally different to the other version of Jordan De Goey. This is the one they've always wanted when they've put him in the midfield. And it makes me think, it's almost like Craig McRae's got to him and said, hey, mate, okay, you've been going okay. No one's having a crack at how your form is, but but I can get other players to do this. We've got other players who can get 9, 6, 5, 6 and 8 contested possessions a game. You got to be 15, 13, 14, 15 contested possessions for us. So get your hands dirty. And when he was full-chested at all those contests in the first 40 minutes, coming through stoppage, just taking traffic, he looked terrific. And he was the one that was almost men versus boys for a little while. He made Tom Green look slow. And I'll tell you what he did do. He made Cal Ward look like a first gamer. If you want to have a close look at those centre bounces in the third quarter when the game was separated, Ward goes to ground. He can't match his physicality. He can't match his burst. And we talked about Cal Ward, in glowing terms. Yeah. His last 6 to 8 weeks have been really good. But he made him look second rate. So to me, that was the gap in the game. To Goey getting his hands dirty. Can he do it again this week? Absolutely he can, because that now fuels a fire. Hey, that's what I am. Sometimes you don't know you're doing something until someone points it out or shows you some vision. I guarantee there's been a conversation there.
Yep. All right, so De Goey, PFI, who's next?
Jack Crisp. No one talks about Jack Crisp. No one. Well, they talk about him, but not the way they should. He's almost the fifth Beatle in this midfield, and he was involved in Collingwood's first 2 goals. Well, he brings the ball back into the corridor, and these are the guys that you need. If you stay straight line in finals, you have to go through so many layers of the opposition's defence. They're set ready for the first one. You get that? They're set ready for the next one. And you go through the best of what the opposition have. You've got to go through whether it's Buckley, then Taylor. Instead, if you can come off the line and use corridor, you can bypass them all and get someone out the back. In the second quarter, when they really struggled, he only had 3 touches. So GWS take control of the game and look like they're going to gap them.
Yep.
Look, they were coasting. I reckon late second term, it looked like, Collingwood don't have the answers here, and the ball movement was an issue. And then in the third quarter, Chris has 6 disposals, 2 of those become scores. He was critical in that 15 minutes when they kicked 5 goals, and that's the sort of player he is. If he's getting it, it's coming in board, and then everything hits flow. So it was the game number 1 for metres gained. Only De Goey and Elliott had more score involvements, and only Pendlebury put the ball inside 50 more. His game for a 19 disposal game is so undervalued and underrated that it's ridiculous. He's a key member this week. If he's able to do what he does, then away they go as a midfield. The link play starts with Jack Crisp.
Yep.
And if you're talking about, everyone's talking about tagging Jordan De Goey, I understand the logic. We just talked about his impact. Me, if you're asking me for a secondary option, it's Jack Crisp.
Yep.
If Crisp doesn't start it, it doesn't start. So I think he's an incredibly. Well, we're talking about him scoring off half back, and that's their only mode at the moment. So just picture intercept or a spilt ball onto that spilt ball, side bottom, Dacos, Crisp, and then it goes to those that who make the money. So yeah, they're the 2 for me that really jumped off the page. Because if you want to have a look at their scoring profile, Collingwood, on the weekend they had 36 opportunities from the defensive 50 for 1 point. They're not getting repeat inside 50s. They haven't really got repeat inside 50s for the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep.
They had 15 on the weekend for 2 points. So those two functions are not quite working. And scoring from stoppages, which has been a strength rounds 1 to 10 off the scale, plateaued a little bit since then. So if you just do the home and away season, they average 37 points from stoppages. Through the finals, they've only got 18. So you play against the best now that are all set up. They're all really good defensively. No one gives anything. There's no obvious holes in terms of defensive integrity, off stoppage behind the ball from the opposition. So it is harder to score, but to be snapping that figure in half is a big drop. So I keep looking at Collingwood's game, and I've loved their year, and they're in the big one. But you just feel like there's a couple of bits that need to elevate to win. Now that may be 100% wrong. We're talking Monday morning and hoping that we can see forward in this game. But yeah, those 2 players for me were huge. Full-chested Jordan and Jack Corridor Crisp.
Take me to Brisbane. Where was the PFI at the Lions?
Yeah, I thought if you want to script a way to win a prelim, to check out all areas of your game, have the opposition kick 5 in the first 25 minutes. and just see where the fragility is with your mental state, because you've been here before and failed.
Yep.
And some of your best players have let you down in crunch times before, but they stay strong. Like the first quarter, so talk about what failed. First quarter, they got stuck in their defensive half. Carlton kept winning it, driving it in. And they just got the ball and kicked it as far as they could out of the defensive 50 every time. 15 kicks from defensive 50, all straight line, all long. 10 of them become turnovers on the way out. 2 of them bounce back over their head for goal. 3 of them go out of bounds. Only 2 of their 15 out of the defensive 50 were retained. So it was obvious what the change needed to be, but are you good enough? And can you handle making that change? There was only one guy that made the change, and Kadeem Coleman, who just went all Andrew McLeod on us for about 40 minutes. So let's talk specifically about what he did. So he had 14 kicks on Saturday night. 5 of those kicks were within sort of 40 metres of the Brisbane defensive goal, right? So all of those kicks go wide. They go wider of where he's starting. They track wider because he's playing safe. So hitting the boundaries for no cost, not back in the corridor. Of the others that are north or further up the field than 40 metres to his own goal, so outside of his own defensive 50 and forward, 8 of his 9 all went inboard. They all went to corridor, and there's the absolute peach was the one he brought back from the wing into the heart of the corridor. They kicked it long to Charlie Cameron, who dropped the chest mark in the goal square. Now, that would have been play of the year.
Yep.
It was unbelievable. So he's maximum damage. I wonder whether they're using him as aggressively as they can. And I think if you asked Michael Voss the one mistake Carlton made, it was not putting the clamps on this guy. Kadeem Coleman, in my opinion, he won them the game. He set the whole thing alight. And once they got their flow going again, everyone took a calming breath. The coach's box relaxed for a bit. The players knew that, okay, we're in the game again. They're struggling to stop our ball movement. So the use of Fogarty, Motlop, and at times Doherty rolling up as half forwards to be an extra at the stoppage allowed this guy to do his own thing.
Yeah.
And it was a bad tactic.
So we had Stephen King was part of our broadcast, and that was what he was talking about. It's just in real time, this is what the problem is, and you had to look to solve it. Okay.
So he was the number 1 score involvement player on the ground,
Yep.
Jared, and he's playing half back. Look, that shouldn't be. There's a dozen players closer to goal than him that are having probably 3 times as much opportunity to get their hands on the ball.
All right, where else did they have PFI, the Lions?
Well, I thought no one talks about Big Oscar, but I thought when the game was in real trouble, he was the one that went in as the ruckman at clearances and just turned the whole thing around. He was just terrific. So in the second quarter, they won 5 of 6 centre bounce clearances. He had 10 hit outs, 5 to advantage. I like to look at first possessions because the clearance numbers don't always tell you the story about what the ruckman has done. So if I tap the ball to you, Jared, and you fumble it or you don't quite get it to the outside.
That seems about right.
That's a high likelihood of happening. So his job is to give them first opportunity. So they had 15 to 6 first possessions, I should say.
Yep.
So then it's up to the midfielder to turn that first possession into a clearance. 15 to 6 is a smashing. Now they didn't capitalise on all of those, so they got to look at that. They got to work out how to maximise that advantage. And this is where I think the biggest, we'll track forward in a minute, but I think this is where the biggest opportunity is for Brisbane this week. He's a phenomenal man, Big Oscar. At 204 centimetres, he's a seriously big dude. I think Darcy Cameron is seriously gettable for Oscar. Mason Cox has been the wild card in there. If you have a look at the centre bounces over the last 4 weeks, Darcy Cameron at centre bounces has only had 3 hits to advantage. Mason Cox has had 13. He's a better product in the middle right now than what Cameron is.
Yep.
But they've got to use Mason Cox forward.
Yeah. Yep.
Because of McStay. So Big Oscar's about the same as Mason Cox, around that 13 mark. So there are some problems there for Collingwood for me. And Big Oscar is the one that really could separate this game from a clearance point of view.
Did you have one more on the Lions front?
Harris Andrews. Yeah. I mean, that first quarter. The whole back 6, really. I mean, they cough up 22 inside 50s at a cost of only 2 marks inside 50. Like, you have 22 and a quarter. Like, you should be off on stress leave for the next 3 quarters, Jared. 5 goals, could have been 8 or 9. Harris Andrews, 4 intercepts, 6 spoils for a quarter of football. Darcy Gardner, 4 spoils for a quarter of football. They were just fantastic. So in terms of how do you want to win a game, to me, this was the perfect prelim script. After having the week off, come back, get absolutely brained for 25 minutes, and then take control for 60, and then just run the clock.
Yep.
I thought this was some sort of performance, but defensively it was brilliant. Charlie, Harry, and Tom de Koning, only 2 marks inside 50 between those 3 guys. That's just disarming the opposition totally. And they only allowed 6 marks inside 50 for the game. So take your mind forward. So if they get, is Myercheck better than Charlie Curnow, or is Coxie better than Harry Mackay? Who's the Tom de Koning at Collingwood? Look, these are what we're talking about. We're talking about you versus me, you versus me, 6 of those. And I just, the more you look at it, the more you think, gee whiz, that was a stamp that takes them a long way this week.
Kingy, PFI, Carlton.
Gee, they were very good, weren't they? That first 25 minutes, the joint was rocking. We love what Vossi's been able to do with this team in such a short space of time. And I do think that they will rue their half-forward flank decision to roll one up at stoppage and maybe not trust the stoppage group to get it done as much and allow Kadeem Coleman to have space behind the ball. But they were very good. They were very good. So I'm not going to sit here and go after them. I still think they're a little bit like what we just spoke about with the Giants. Who are those half-forward hybrid types that are going to kick 3, 4, 5 goals in a prelim final that you're just craving or you need? Yeah, the Mitch McGovern, he's a half-back. If he's at half-forward, I mean, that's what they purchased him for. To me, they just lack that. And I know Motlop's a young player and he's learning. And I know Fogarty's been around a little while, but they didn't really pose the threat that they needed. Jack Martin kicked a couple, but wasn't the constant stone in the shoe that I was hoping he'd be, and that's what they've got him there for. So I think they just needed, in the end, they probably just lacked one creative forward. But gee, they set the game up really well. Yep. I feel for them a little bit because really difficult to go to Brisbane. And this is the discussion about, the marathon, 24 weeks. It's the home and away season. It just gives you a full block of 23 games to avoid going to Brisbane, to avoid going to Adelaide, to avoid going to Perth. Vossi gets this group fresh off this disappointment for next year. This is the challenge. We're good enough to do this, this, and this. This is what 2023 has shown us. We're actually good enough to be here. Now, how do we get that little bit better? Well, you've got to improve here. It's such a great preseason for him, I think, now. He's endorsed himself as the answer, as the coach. So a huge win at Carlton. Carlton would have sacked him at half-time in years gone by, Jared, after just the second quarter alone. But they've now got full stability as a footy club. Their leadership, on and off field's just in supreme touch. I felt Paddy Cripps just was so banged up at the end. He couldn't be the Paddy that we wanted him to be.
It's a little bit like those years where Joel Selwood would get to the end of the final series and just had nothing left. And some years you do and some years you don't. Yeah. Whatever that knock was that he got late in the home and away.
Yeah, it just knocked him around, didn't it?
So what about Charlie Curnow's final series?
Yeah, look, I asked Jason Dunstall the same question after the game. He said, well, he's got to live with this. He's got to learn from it. He's got to live with it. He does play against the best every week, and he does play against the opposition tactics every week. Okay? When you're at that level of player, the fold back from supporting defenders is tough to deal with. But the bottom line is he's had no impact on a final series. 1 goal, 1 goal, 1 goal. I mean, they just were desperate for him to have a 15-minute patch in that second quarter and be the reason you get over the line. So he's got to live with that, but he's had a very good year. And again, you've got to stack. You talked about the 2 prelim final losers last year now being the grand finalists of this year. That's what they're looking for. Okay, learn from it. You're going to get an opportunity next year. Let's correct it. They do need to get a fraction better on the edges. So I hope they go shopping again in trade period.
Yeah, I think the most interesting aspect of Collingwood and Brisbane out of last year, preliminary finalists was they made substantial changes to their list, which led to substantial change in their best 22.
Yeah.
So what do... And Carlton maybe a little more so than the Giants. So PFI for our two losers there. It is irksome to be talking about umpiring after a preliminary final, yet it was unavoidable after Friday night.
Yeah, and I don't think the 4 umpire thing's worked all year. I've had a problem with where they stand. They stand where you're trying to switch the ball on that short 45-degree kick-in board. I don't think we've got a good enough set of umpires to have 4 good ones at every game ready to go. Yeah, I'd love to read the review of the umpires, their own assessment of their little part of the business. Everyone agrees with Hodgie. Everyone was at odds with what happened on Friday night. I thought there was the biggest error of the weekend, and you would have seen it. It was the Carlton versus Brisbane.
Oh, I called
10 minutes, 9:07 to go, second quarter. Sam Walsh gets a free kick and a 50-metre penalty paid against Zach Bailey. And as he's running to take the 50, Zach Bailey stays in his way. Now, all year, they tell you, get out of the way, we'll pay another 50. And to the point where Sam Walsh knows the rules.
Oh, he's so clever.
And he runs straight into the back of Bailey and says, hey, umpire, pay that.
Yep.
I'm telling you now, that is 50. And if they pay that, the Blues get back out to a 3-goal lead. So that, to me, was the biggest error of the weekend, because this is a player knowing the rules greater than the 4 umpire. All 4 umpires saw that. The game was stopped. So I can understand them saying, no. One umpire says, I think Toby Green lowered his height and drew the high contact. Play on. That's an interpretation. I'm not going to argue that, right? All 4 umpires saw that and didn't have the courage to pay it. You got to pay that. How does Sam Walsh know the rules more than 4 umpires?
Yeah. It was clever by Walsh. He knew exactly what he was doing, and Bailey hadn't got out of the way, so he ran into him, and then he fell over while doing so.
It was done by Bailey.
Yeah.
But so how do the umpires miss that?
Yep. I think so. The philosophical side of Friday night is interesting. I think we all play a role in this. There's that idea of let the players sort it out, but you have to have the laws of the game applied. So once it gets to all chips in a preliminary final, I think you want the sliding scale of where you blow the whistle. But they did allow a no-holds-barred game, and the players figured it out. So they're cannoning into blokes in marking contests with reckless abandon. They were happy to trip blokes over. As the players figured it out that the whistle wasn't going to blow unless they pulled out a 2x4 and levelled somebody with it. Is the whistle wasn't going to blow? That's not acceptable when the stakes are at their absolute highest.
No. And the one that I thought was probably an error was the Goey when he was tackled, taken the ground, and then still was given more time to dispose. But at the start of the year, we were told we're going to be really strict on this. We don't want players getting slung to the ground, but we're making them commit the tackle for longer. Like it goes against all the philosophical changes we've made. It can just be one bad performance. I'm okay with them coming out and saying, hey, we didn't have a great night. But the Sam Walsh one really annoys me. Because it was so obvious for all 4 when the game was stopped.
Yep. Just a curiosity. So Collingwood have just sent through a lengthy statement to their members, so I just need a minute or two to read that. So that was what they got wrong for Loop Logics, the future of construction management. For a free demo, visit looplogics.com. Yesterday, the coaches around the league had to vote for the coach of the year. So it's done on the Sunday after the preliminary finals. There's 3, 2, and 1, and there are 4 magnificent candidates at the end. They were the 4 active coaches on the weekend. If you had to fill in that ballot paper yesterday, what would you have done?
3 being the best.
3 the best.
Who's had the best year as a coach? I think Michael Voss has had the best year as a coach. From all sorts of pressure at the midpoint of the year to correcting, to giving this team now a firm and fixed identity to go forward. And yep, they run aground in a prelim in Brisbane. Having finished 5th on the home and away table with 13 wins, they've got to find a way to get to 15 wins next year, and that's the challenge. If he's coach of the year next year, then they're probably holding the cup. So that's the level that he's brought them back to. Two, well, everyone will talk about Kingsley at the Giants. I think he's had more to work with than a Ross Lyon, who did a lot with St Kilda. Chris Fagan, I'll give Fags two, because the challenges that he had right through a pre-season period is something that we haven't really seen. How do you front up? You're managing a football club, not just 20 players, and you've got to be strong enough to absorb all of those things going on in the background. And you know where you sit with all this. You have that 100% belief that you're not a guilty party in any way, shape or form. And people are saying things about you when you're walking down the street, when you're walking to a football club, you'll be thinking, what's he thinking about me? What's this person in the staff? What are the staff thinking about me? But then I've got to stand at the front of a group and command their attention. I'd give Fags two. I think he's been absolutely terrific. One, for absolute coaching, it's hard to go past Craig McRae. All those close finishes. I remember the conversation at this point last year. At this point last year, I said, "Oh no, they're going to have to get." They had a lucky run. They won 9 of 10 by under 10 points. And no, that won't happen next year. Well, guess what? It happened next year. So it has to be something in that. And we love how he brings this positivity. He brings us all on the ride. Collingwood fans have never been as happy as what they are right now. Well, hopefully next Saturday night they might be happier again. But what he's been able to do and provide, and in the end, I keep saying it, you just want to be proud of your football club. And he's made Collingwood fans proud of their football club again.
Yep. So the votes for the Coach of the Year, and that's announced tomorrow night. So we'll talk to Bucks about it.
Who have you got?
I would.
You're not going and getting your award again, are you? You going down there and getting your award again?
I would go 3 Fagan.
Fags?
Yep, for all the reasons you articulated, and was just thinking about it on the flight home. I think that's it. I would go 2 Voss, 1 McRae. So I would just flip 3 and 2. And we might have missed the Coach of the Year. It might be Kingsley. So it's such a great race.
What are you doing tomorrow night, too?
No, I don't. So, and a big cheerio to Carl Amon, who ruined everything last year.
How did Carl Amon get 15 votes?
No one will ever understand how that happened. The Brownlow. So we don't do seedings this week because there's only 2 left. So for Tyre Power, Big Footy final sale now on. I actually didn't check with Tyre Power whether they were happy to sponsor the Brownlow multi. So welcome aboard.
They will be.
Okay. So the 8-leg multi has failed in the past.
Miserably.
We're on a 5-year run of outs here.
Feels more than 5.
So rather than be deterred, I've gone to the 10-leg multi.
Oh, I love it. I love it already.
So there's a spread of information here. There's 6 different counts I've got hold of. That I don't put opinion into this. I just run an analysis.
Have you done more research than last year?
More.
Have you learned from
2
your mistakes?
additionals.
Tell me there's no ruckman.
No, there's a couple of fault lines.
Hang on, no. I just want any ruckman in there.
Nope.
Any centre half forwards in there.
Yes.
Problems.
Forwards over midfielders.
Problems.
Okay. So Jordan Dawson, Adelaide, locked. Zach Merritt, Essendon, locked. Caleb Sarong, Fremantle, locked. Noah Anderson, Gold Coast, locked. Zach Butters, Port Adelaide, locked.
Over Rowell.
Yep. And Jack Sinclair, St Kilda, locked. So I think they're easy. And and Errol Goulden, Sydney, locked. You need those. This is a hard year to get it to multiply out to anything. So you need those spread of players. So Dawson, Merritt, Sarong, Anderson, Butters, Sinclair, and Goulden. I think they're all no-brainers.
That's 7.
Yeah. Right.
No-brainers at 7. Like this.
I've gone Charlie Curnow over Patrick Cripps.
Madness.
So Cripps is a former winner. That gives you. There is a big buffer on the spreads that I've seen: 20-11, 17-9, 17-11. There is a big gap between Charlie Curnow and Patrick Cripps in the forecasting.
If Cripps gets Curnow, having him a known polling sensation, Jared, I want you to put out a press release like Ticketek have today.
So I've gone Toby Green over Tom Green in the head-to-head battle of the Greens. That Toby will finally get what he should get.
Midfielders award, Jared.
There's a big gap between them on the spreads that I've seen.
Okay.
And then my kicker for fun. So that's 9 legs. And then I'm adding Jeremy Cameron from Geelong to beat. Geelong's weird. Dangerfield, Stewart, Myers. I just feel like Jeremy Cameron.
You could leave him out, Jared.
No. Why? What's the fun in leaving them out? So it's a 10-legger. Dawson at Adelaide, Charlie Curnow at Carlton, Merritt at Essendon, Sarong at Fremantle, Anderson at Gold Coast, Toby Green at the Giants, Butters at Port Adelaide, Sinclair at St Kilda, Goulden at Sydney, and Jeremy Cameron at Geelong.